Recording in progress.
Yep. Good morning, everyone. So, yesterday we learned about how we handle event binding in class components. So, we are discussing about class components, and in class components, we learned about how event binding works. We already know about style class binding. We know about state and style binding. So class binding. And one more you saw event binding. And while working with event binding, what is new in event binding? So the new in event binding is nothing but actually in event binding, the events will point towards methods. Earlier we used to point towards functions. And if event have to use any state related member, then event must bind with the current class memory. If event is not binded with current class memory, it cannot use the state of current class. And how do we do that? We can do in three ways. By using bind in constructor, by using bind in the handler, and without using bind. Without using bind, you can make the event handler written so that it can make use of the memory of class. So rest of event concepts are same. There is no change in the events. Only the point is we are using methods and event handlers with the bind method when you are specially working with the state. That is one new. So state is little different and style class binding are same. There are no changes. Event binding as usual. And all events are same. There is no change. All events, all event arguments, everything will be same. Event arguments, we learned about custom arguments. We learned about how to pass the default arguments. They are all same. All synthetic events are same. Mouse events, keyboard events, touch events, whatever you learn, same. So how you handle two-way data binding here? Suppose if you need to handle two-way data binding, what we need to do, let's say here, just one example I will show. So we are configuring a state and in the state, we are defining some details. State is having details like name and it is having a price and it is having some stock. It's a Boolean true or false. Like this, we are having some data. And we need to design a form. We have like register product and we are designing some details, data term, some name. So data definition. So input type is text. And we have price. We have input type as number. So we have a stock and we have checkbox. Input type is equal to checkbox. And we just used as label or span like available. Okay. Now here we have a button. We can just use the button submit. Now what we want is we want the data to be collected from that form. Actually, without using any type of form related library, then how do you manage that? Two-way binding means, we have to write on change events. So we have to write handle name change is one method. So handle price change is another method, and handle stock change is another method. Now we have event arguments same. There is no change in event arguments. And what we need to do, this dot set state. In the state, actually name is coming from e dot target dot value. Same. What about price? Price is coming from this dot state dot price. That means it is present in current state. It will come from there. Stock is also coming from this dot state, this dot state dot stock. It is here. Same thing we have to follow everywhere. When price changes, this will come, name will come from this dot state dot name. Price will come from e dot target dot what value. And here, so here this is also this dot state dot name, and stock comes from this boolean. That means stock is going to come from e dot target dot checked. Checked indicates whether it is selected or not. Now, by default, whenever you are typing the details, you can get the details. So we can handle submit. On submit, we can collect the data and we can display, or without submit also, we can access the data. Directly data is updated, so we can display the data directly. So here, whatever the values are there, you want to update in some location. So that means here we have details. So data list and data term, and this is name. And from where name is coming, this dot state, this dot state dot name. Another price. Price is coming from this dot state dot price. And another is a stock. Stock is coming from here. Stock is a boolean. We can't show that. This dot state dot stock. State dot stock. So stock, if it is true, then what we do, we put here available. And here we keep as out of stock. Now you can see these are the details we are having. And you entered some name, and that name have to display there. That means we are entering some name, Samsung TV. And we have entered the price and we have selected the stock. But these are not binded with our elements. We need to bind them. So text here, what we have to do on change. This dot what handle name change. On change. So this dot handle price change. And on change. So this dot handle stock change. Now you can see whenever you enter the details, then it is going to get that here. You see now issues are there because we are using state, and you know what to do. All events that are using state, you need to bind them. So this dot, what is it? Handle name change is equal to this dot handle name change dot bind with this. every event you need to bind here. So this dot handle price change is equal to this dot handle price change, but bind with this. So this dot handle stock change, this dot handle stock change, bind with this. So all this process is important because all are using state. When all are using state, we need to define them. So you see now everything is okay. So we entered the price and we selected stock available or not, it is going to get that. So here event handling is almost similar. Only one point is while using the state, you need to make sure that you are binding these events. You bind in the constructor or in the event handler, depending on the requirement. This is simple example of that. Here, this is example of data binding in a class component. So this is two-way binding. Two-way, one-way binding, both are here. So example, some product dot what JSX. So this is example for that, how we can handle two-way data binding in class component. So all these important points you need to remember, but you know that dealing a form in this way is difficult. Then usually what we do, we use third party. Unfortunately, all third parties are not suitable for class components. Means latest third parties, whatever you learn, they are all not everything suitable because many third parties that you have learned here, they are all related to what React 17 and higher version. Whenever we try to use a third party, we checked whether it is supporting React 17 and higher. Because React 17 and higher completely deals with hooks and it can manage hooks. Class components cannot handle hooks. So many third parties which provides hooks, we cannot use them here. That means you have to check the third party whether they are supporting class components or not. If they are supporting class components, then you can use. Otherwise, you have to go with any another third party which supports class component. So we will see how to use formic in class component. How to deal with formic in class component. So formic is a third party form library for React. We already know this. It provides use formic hook to configure and handle form interactions. Class component. Class component cannot use the hooks. Class component cannot use the hooks. It can use the built-in components. It can use the built-in components of formic library. Components of formic library. It can use the built-in components of formic library. So what are those built-in? We have formic, we have form, we have field. So we have error message. This already will not, we can use this. So every third party don't have built-in components like that. So it is a problem that you cannot use every third party here. And how to use formic components already I given you an example. You can try the same here. So let's using the form. Formic in class components, how to deal, let's see. And you know that if you are dealing with formic, then you don't need all these events. Huh? You don't need all these events. I'm not even using the state also. Just clean up everything. We don't need any events and methods, just simple. And here we want to design a form. We have a button as register or submit. This button type is what? Submit. And how to create a form now? To create a form, so first you have to import. So from formic library, we need to import. What we need to import, one is formic, another one is form, and another one field, another one is what? Error message. We need to import all this. So now let's go and we need to design form. So then first you need to create a formic component. So this formic component will have a form. Inside the form, you keep all this content. That means you design the form with all this content. Now, how to configure the formic you learned? Formic will have what? Initial values. You cannot use formic here. So initial values. Initial values is an object. That object contains name. It contains price. And it contains what? Stock. It contains stock. Stock is some false. Like this we can have. What else? Initial values, and it can have submit, on submit. On submit, what it have to do? It should collect the values and it should submit the values. Suppose console.log, we are submitting the values. That is on submit. What else it can have? Formic component, what else it can have? You already learned. You can have validation schema, right? We can have validation schema. Validation schema means we have to bring it from where? Validation schema we have to use from yup. You have to build that. And you know you need to import yup in order to use the validation schema. How to import? Import asterisk as yup. So yup from which library? Yup. Means all validation schema are imported. You can import any specific also, like required, like min length, like max length. But asterisk, yup, imports everything. We already learned validation. Huh? So you need to set up that. So how yup uses yup dot what? Object. Yup object comprises of keys and values. What is the key? Key is name. What is the key uses yup? Yup dot what type? String type. And it is what? Required. So that means here we say name required, something like this. We can add min length, max length, patterns, everything. For every field, we need to set up like this. Okay, once you configured this, what is the next step? Next step is nothing but, so on change here, we don't need input anymore. We don't need input. We don't need on change anymore. What we have to do? We have to use what? Field. We need to define a field. We already learned formic, right? Field type. What is the type of the field? It is text. And the name. So the name refers to the name. You need an error message here. That means class name text danger. And we want to display an error message. Error message for which field? So it is for name field. And here also same. So what is it? This is also field. This field is a type. Type is what? It is a number. And name is what? Price. And this is also a field. We need to define a field. And what is the field type? Field type is what? It is a checkbox. And name is what? That is stock, right? That means whatever fields you are configuring, you are defining them here. And I am not even writing on submit, on change any events here, because already we learned how to deal with this form, right? And when you design the form here, let's go into the console and check here. So in the console, so we will verify the data. So we entered some name, and suppose without entering the name, so then it says name required. Validation works fine. You entered some name, you entered some price, and you selected a stock, and submit, it should submit the data. In a class component, we cannot use formic hook. We have to completely depend on only components, because hooks you cannot use in classes. There is no chance. Whatever hooks you learned, including cookies, or we discussed, everything use reducer, use context, use reference. We can't use them. Then you may ask, like, then how to maintain cookies, how to maintain other state. For that, you need alternative reference techniques. So cookies you can do anywhere, but what you have to do, check for a library which can create cookies without hooks. That means you need to check an old library which can manage that. Or you use the traditional browser related document.cookie. That is the only way you can manage. So class components have limitations of unable to use the hooks. So you have to depend on all techniques which doesn't involve hooks. That is important. So this is how you deal with a form in class component, right? So I don't need to explain what these are because we already learned them. Just example I am giving here. So product dot what? JSX. In this, we are designing a form with the class components and handling the validations also, right? So Formic or any other third party first check their library. Are they have support for class components or not? Many libraries don't have support. They might have, but an older version, not latest. That means even Formic have old version. That old version supports some concepts of class component. So you need to set up and install that old version, then it will work, right? But it is not recommended to use these classes and all, but just we got an idea, because several projects you will face class components. In real-time projects, when you go to work in companies, they are still using class components. So you have to know. If anyone asks like, can I use class component, function component combination? You can use. There is no issue in that. Right? So now here, once you know how to handle forms. Now another point is, so API requests in a class component. API requests in class component, actually you can use all Ajax techniques in class components. All Ajax techniques means we learned XML, HTTP request, right? So we learned about fetch. We learned about jQuery Ajax, and we learned about Axios. Like everything will work same. There is no change. So all API requests are going to work in a same way. There is no change. So if any third party is using some hook for fetching the data or posting the data, then you cannot use it. If it is not using hooks, it is using functions and methods, you can use them. Because we can access functions and use them in a class, not directly as class member, but we can use in methods. So it is possible to use functions. So for example, let's see here. So I copied this example. Yeah. Now let's see here. So how do we fetch the data and present the data here? Now, you know, in order to fetch the data, handle the data, we need to import what it is, Axios, from Axios. And here we are having some drop down categories. Categories is there. So select category, something. Now I want to pull all the categories from fake store and we want to display here. Then generally what we do is, we cannot create a function. We will create a method. Method name is load categories. And this load categories method will use Axios.get. So it will get from https://fakestore.api.com/products/what categories. And the dot, then it gets the response, and it gets directly the data, right? So it directly gets the data. So it will directly get the data. So we need to present the data. That means it will get a response data, which we will present here in a state. That means what we need now, we are configuring this dot state. State is an object. In that we have categories. Categories is an array. So into that categories array, suppose we have products. Products is again array. Into the categories array, we want to send the response data. That means what we have to do, this dot what? Set state. Set state, it is an object. In that what? We have categories. Into the categories, we need to send, what is it? Response dot data. We have to send the response data into categories. Now this is load categories method. And when to execute load categories? When component mounts. And how to write a component mount? Component did mount. Component did mount. So we have to call this dot what? Load categories, because methods in a class are accessible within the class by using this. And this is accessing them and displaying them here. And here we need to display them inside this drop down. So what we need to do? So we need to write here a binding expression. What is this? This dot state dot categories dot map. So we need to read every category, and for every category we need to create an option. Option will have a key, that is category, and option will have a value. The value is also category. That is how it is going to access the data and show. Rest of every concept is same. There is no change. So no need to explain anything here. You can try the same concept, only the make sure that you are creating some methods and calling the methods. In interviews, one interesting question they ask, like, is it possible to load these categories not in a component mount phase? So in the constructor, I'm not loading them, then it is empty. Is it possible to do in constructor? So in many interviews, they ask this question at experience level, saying that if I have a constructor, why I need a mount phase again? That means if I have a constructor is a function. It is a method which is automatically executed for every class. Constructor is a method that executes automatically for a class. So whenever a component is created, constructor will execute. Then why can't you give the functionality to constructor? Why you are giving to mount? Because the point is constructor is before the mount phase. At the time of constructing, the state is created. And already we learnt a rule, if you remembered. What is that rule? While creating the state, you cannot assign the state. While creating the state, you cannot assign the state. It will work. If I write in constructor, it will work. But it is not recommended. It is not recommended. You see now, I use load categories inside construct. That means I am not using in component mount phase. Then you see in the output, it is working. Now interviewer's question is this. They will show you that in a constructor I am writing, it is working. Then why I need a mount phase? Why I need a mount phase? Because constructor, you know that constructor will execute how many times? Only once. If I need the same repeatedly again and again, then writing in constructor will not work. It will execute only once. It will work, but it will execute only once. So that is the reason you can observe now in the console there is an error. Means error means in the console they have to give you one warning and error like options they have to give. So here it is not showing, but technically that error is actually because I'm using this load categories here. So state means you access here, configuring the state. You see, it is working fine. But usually there will be an error. I think some issue is there. It is not showing, but it is not recommended. That means actually it should show a warning. The warning saying that yesterday we saw you cannot set state in constructor while configuring the state. But this is never recommended to do that. We don't recommend to do this. So it is always recommended to do that in which phase? In mount phase. So if we have to deal with this example, I will give you this one. No need to explain all of them. Already we learned. Only the point is how you use in a class, right? So this is product dot JSX. Let me copy this. This is an example for that option. Right. So here the question is, is it possible to call any method in constructor? Is it possible to call any method in constructor? Answer is yes, it is possible to do that. So it is not recommended if you are handling state in the method, in the defined method. It is not recommended if you are handling state in the defined method. So it is not good to assign state while creating state. That is very important point. It will work, but it is not recommended. And however, constructor can execute only once. Hence, method cannot run for multiple requests. Hence, method cannot run for multiple requests. So every time at the time of creating an object for that component, the method will execute. So class components, how do we manage in a React application? So another concept now we need to know is one more is properties in class component. What is the purpose of property? To create a controlled component. We can create controlled components by using properties. So that you can reuse, you can extend. What is the specialty about the class? Because see, how you define properties in a function. You define properties in a function as parameters. Function parameter, na? Right? Then how you define parameter for a class? How you define parameter for a class? Can constructor be parameterized? Yes, constructor can be parameterized, but here we cannot. Why we cannot? Because we are inheriting a class called React component or React pure component that base class should support. So what is the point here is, even you define in constructor, it will execute only once. That means at the time of allocating memory, you pass the value. After that, you cannot modify it. So what is the concept here is, in class components, properties are inbuilt. properties are inbuilt. Properties are already available for a class component. Just you need to invoke the properties and configure them. That means actually what is the specialty about a class is whenever you design a class. So for example, let's create a class. This example I already posted here. You create a rest of the example like shopper template like example you can create. So let's create one thing. Okay, I will clean up this data. Okay, this is just only a simple component. Okay, I want to use here a nav bar. And you remembered already we designed a nav bar in custom components, but it is designed with function. Can I use that component in class component? Can we use a function? You are not using as class member. Observe now where you are using in render method. In a render method, is it possible to use a function? It is possible. A method allows function. Function is not allowed as class member. Class member means directly the member of class. Currently, if I am using a function inside this method, it is possible now. Right? That means in render method, you are using a function. It is possible. You can access them. For example, what is that? You designed a nav bar, you designed a login. You can use them here directly. You see, you created a nav bar. A nav bar where we created custom components. We can use them. If you want to create such a reusable component by yourself. So let's see. I will go to the class components. Here itself, I will add a new one. I will add a new file. Suppose I will give here as, so some, I will say sidebar, something sidebar.jsx. I'm just using a sidebar.jsx. Okay. And it is a class component. So export class name is sidebar. And it extends react dot what component, and it have a constructor. The constructor will call the super constructor. It have a render method. So this render method is going to return. It is going to return the markup. In this markup, I defined a nav. In this nav, what we want to do is we want to create an unordered list and a class as a list unstyled. That means it will not have any numbering. Okay. Now what we want to do is in this unordered list, we want a heading. This heading is a title of the navbar company. Then usually what we do, we need to define properties. Actually, in our function component, what we do, we pass properties in parameter and we access the properties. Properties is object type. What is speciality of class is class component is already have properties in the base class. That means the base component class provides properties. You can access. You don't need to declare. Actually, in function component, we need to declare the properties as parameter. Here, properties inbuilt. Inbuilt means they are actually implemented from base class. So the base class is which one? The base class is react.component. And what is property type? Object type. Object type means it needs a key. What is the key? Some title. That means now it is expecting a title. So I will put a class name here. So W is 25. So padding 2 or 3. And BG, suppose say dark, text say white. Like this I am giving. BG light. Better I will give as BG light. Having some option and it needs some list of items. Then we put a dynamic expression again. What we do, this dot what, props dot map. That means in the properties, there is a property called nav items. It is map means it is expecting an array. That means we need to read every item, and for every item, we need to create a list item. So key, we every item will have class name. This is padding 2, margin Y 3, and BG dark, BG some secondary, or yeah, BG secondary, and text as white. This is every item we are defining. So that means for every item we are configuring like this. Okay, that's fine. Now what we do is we will keep also rounded sum 2. Fine. Okay, now I want to use this sidebar in my product page. Then you have to first import the sidebar. What we do, import. So sidebar, from the sidebar. And we need to use that sidebar here. So I will put a header or something. I put a header here and I am using margin top 4. And here I want the sidebar. Then I am using the sidebar. But actually sidebar requires some attributes to handle, right? Sidebar requires some attributes to handle. What are the attributes? Properties. What is the property now? Title. Title is suppose shopper. That is the title. And what else it is expecting? Now items. Now items is an array of home. So like shop. So like blog. So like pages. So like contact. Like this we are using. And it has to get that sidebar and show. So we created a sidebar. That means we are creating some reusable components. Earlier, we have to, this is a controlled component. Controlled sidebar is a controlled component and it is controlled with properties. And what is difference between the properties of function and the properties of class? In function, properties are defined as parameters, and in class, properties are inbuilt available. You have to just use the properties, define the keys, and configure the values. That's only the change. Of concept is you can design any reusable component here. Themes, colors, effects, already we learned them. We can design anything here, we can manage. So what is the properties in class here? Properties are used to create controlled components. Create controlled components. So component base class provides props for configuring property, for configuring properties. Custom components that implement component base, custom components that implement component base can use props. So props is object type with the key and value collection. With key and value collection. Syntactically, we have a class, component name, extends react.component. We have a constructor and super. Now we have a render with return. So what is the point here is this render return what it can do, it can use this dot props dot key. So that is how you can use the properties. Right. So that is handling the properties. Example, so you need two components. One is sidebar.jsx. Sidebar.jsx, this is the component. Here we are using the properties and define. Another one is .jsx. There I am using the sidebar. And we can use multiple times with different kinds of colors effects we can present. So what is difference between the properties of sidebar, properties of class and properties of function, right? So I hope we have seen everything now. That means what we deal with function, but only the problem is you don't have hooks like user, use context and all. Then we need to depend on different other alternative techniques. That is the reason people used to they depend on lot of Redux like third parties. So that is the reason if anybody asking regularly about Redux, that means he is not updated with majority of things. Because you don't need to be dependent on Redux for every reason. So you have so many inbuilt hooks available with React, which will do that. And in very specially in React 19, they modified the hooks. In React 19 version, they changed the hooks. React 19, as I told you, currently it is in beta version. It is not yet ready. So November they officially announced. It may be by November of this year. Once it comes by November this year, you will see drastic change in the hooks. There is no use state. There is no use context. There is no use reducer anymore. They changed that into another concept. At the end, I will explain. At the end of our React, I will explain the beta release related some new things what they are trying. So that whenever it gets released, you can easily understand. You can easily implement if you know the changes what they are doing. At the end, I will explain that. Use state, use reducer, use context like that hooks they changed. Actually, what they done is they created one universal use. They created one universal use. This use can use state. This use can use context like that. That means there is no use context. There is no use state like that. They have one universal use which can change, which can use for any purpose. For every purpose, only one. That means you can use it for state, you can use for context, you can use for reducers, everything. They are doing this, right? So we'll see those changes later, how they happen, right? Because we expect some changes because it is still in beta release. We are still waiting for that. So these are all the differences between the class components and the function. Actually, in modern React, no need to discuss about class components, but we have to learn about them because we have to work in old versions in some projects. And several already existing projects of React, they are still using class components. So we should know them better, right? Next, one more thing in class components you need to understand is, so React life cycle hooks. React hooks are different. React lifecycle hooks are different. So React lifecycle hooks are nothing but actually what is this React lifecycle hook is? So life cycle actually life cycle represents various phases. Life cycle represents various phases. Life cycle represents various phases. Various phases of a component from start to end. Life cycle represents various phases of a component from start to end. So life cycle for class component comprises life cycle for class component comprises of three major phases. One is some mount, another one is update, another one is unmount. Life cycle for component comprises of class component comprises of three major phases: the mount phase, the update phase, and the unmount phase. And this part of concept is very, very major and important for interviews on for experienced people. They are very important for interviews for experienced people because for experienced people, lot of in-depth questions asked related to these life cycle phases. Because an expert related skill we can test through these kind of architectural concepts only. I already told you in interviews generally how the questions will be for a fresher and an experience. For a fresher, the question will be, what is this? That means he will tell what is it. And for experienced person, question is, explain the architecture behind this. That means you need to explain the architecture behind that concept, behind the concept. That means what is the concept that is for fresher. That means, for example, they will ask you what is a state. That is in general for fresher. Experienced person explain how state works. How state works? That means you need to tell how it creates the state, how it maintains the state, how it will provide data from the state, architecture behind it. That is known only to the experts in the technology who are completely aware of the complete cycle. So this is very major in cracking interviews. So at experience level, because generally, if I ask you what happens in mount phase, then all these days what you will tell, mount phase is for defining action to perform at the time of mounting. That is, but what detail activities performed in mount phase? I want that. That means internally what it does in a mount phase. Those things we need. That is what experienced people know. So they have to know. That is the architecture behind that. Right? Let's see that how the life cycle works and the life cycle hooks work. This is this is exclusively for interviews to crack interviews at experience level. Actually, for that, you need to understand so many things. To understand a component cycle, you need to understand the basic architecture of how your React works actually. That means now what we are going to discuss is the flow of React application. How actually the React application runs. What is the architecture behind this? Let's see. There are levels, so many levels. Applications usually. So we have, and this is the client. So let's say client or user, right? Now the communication with the client is managed. The communication with client is managed by, it is actually managed by a HTTP server. HTTP server. We also call it as a web server. Web server or HTTP server. That means the communication with the client is managed by HTTP server. So we call it as a web server. Actually, this HTTP server, so usually HTTP server have a HTTP processing pipeline. This HTTP server have a HTTP processing pipeline. They have a HTTP processing pipeline, and server will have a application pool. Actually, it will have a application pool. Server is going to have application pool and a pipeline will be there. Internally, so many more things will be there. I will keep it limited. So, because it is too complex to understand at one attempt, right? I will keep it limited. Because remember, web application architecture is too complex. very complex. Even you put 25 years experience in web development, I can ask you questions you can't answer. That means even you have 25 years experience in web development, we can ask you a question which you cannot answer related to your web development only. That means so much complex internal functionalities will be there. So which even an expert doesn't knows every time, right? Because several years back, we used to train people on certification on various technologies. I personally trained people on Microsoft certification on .NET technology. So I worked for Microsoft directly, and my job is to train the developers to do certification in a .NET technology. That is my job. That means we need to train people to crack the certification of Microsoft, official certification of Microsoft on technology like .NET, which is very high level web design technology. And the exam that happens for those developers means we train the developers. Exam minimum criteria is minimum 5 years experience. Exam criteria is minimum 5 years experience on .NET. And they have to attempt the test and crack the test to get certified. Out of 100, only 1-2 people cracked. Out of 100, 1-2 people only can crack. That means even they are 5-7 years experience. Already they are 5-7-10 years experience people on that technology. But the certification related questions are so high level architectural that they don't even know. They worked on the technology for 10 years, but still they can't know. They can't answer until or unless they get some guidance. That means we used to have certification dumps. So we need to train people on the certification. That means we have some certification content will be there, specialized content. I hope I don't have this in my PC here. Let me check. So actually, template documents, presentations, contents. Yeah, you see, this is long back, not now. Actually, it is almost in yeah, this present. This is almost in 2013. Almost in 2013 when we prepared content. This is for preparing people for certification, international certification on technology like .NET. This is the content actually, international certification content. That means we train people on this topic. We have dumps where we have all the questions, answers. We give those dumps to the developers. So I can't show you them. So issues will be there related to copyrights and rules are there. We can't show you those dumps, but we have some dumps where the complete question answer dump will be there. And they have to get prepared with those dumps. And even 10 years .NET developer, 15 years .NET developer, they can't crack. That means out of 100, 10, 20 marks, 30 marks, that's what their range. Because for experienced people, architectural knowledge is very important. Because the issues in an application can be resolved when he is perfectly aware of the architecture. As a developer, errors are not important for us. Errors school kids also can solve because he can read line number 4, this spelling is wrong. Line number 5, this syntax is wrong. School kid also can read and understand the errors. Correcting the errors in coding is very simple thing. That's kids' job. That's not developer's job. But issues like handling the bugs and resolving the bugs, handling the maintenance of applications, resolving that. So these are primary things which needs a lot of architectural knowledge. That is where experienced people are tested even in React. So they are not tested about what is data binding, what is clients binding, style binding, event binding. These are not questions at all. These are not questions at all. Which library, formic library, what is formic? These are not questions. These are for freshers. Experience means complete architecture. And web architecture internally, it's very huge. That means a lot of things are involved. I will cut down into simple for you to understand, because actually web server itself is a huge thing, right? It has a lot of internal things. As of now, you need to know basic two things are there. So you have a web server. Web server will have a application pool. Application pool is nothing but it contains the list of apps. It contains the list of apps. That means apps related virtual path will be here. Virtual app related path. That means what are the apps currently running on server? What apps that server can give you access? Those apps related virtual information is completely kept inside this application pool. In that application pool. Now what happens is in this server, there will be one more option, that is a HTTP handler. HTTP handler will be there. HTTP handler will be there. This handler is responsible for handling the request and response. The request and response will be managed by this handler. Handler is going to manage the request and response. It is going to handle the request and response. So whenever client makes a request, so whenever a request comes from the client, that request is processed in the server. That request will be verified by whom? It is verified by the handler. And where it will verify? In the processing pipeline. In the HTTP processing pipeline, it will process that request. And it will first verify whether the application requested by the user is present in this pool or not. That means it will first verify whether the application requested by the user is available in that pool or not. That means, is that server capable of delivering that application? Is that application is in that pool? Because if an application is not in that pool, then it cannot serve you that application. And sometimes in a pool, we have applications, but we can disable them so that they cannot be served to anyone. That application pool, we can remove from pool, we can add to pool. We can add to pool. Actually, I will show you. In our computer, we have web server like IIS. If you are using Windows, Windows comes with a web server called IIS, Internet Information Services. This is a web server of Windows operating system. You have Tomcat, XAMPP server, WAMP server, different types of servers will be there. This is the server which is inbuilt available with Windows. Every Windows operating system by default have a web server called IIS. You can open this. This is the server. And actually this is the server virtual path. That is the server virtual path. And you can see it have application pools. These application pools will tell what applications it can serve, the applications types, which application it can serve, which version application it can serve, everything will be inside these pools. These are very in-depth about the architecture point. Now the concept is you made a request, client made a request will come to the pool. And see, now actually we are having an application. So this is a React application. We are having a React application. And what is this React application having is internally, this React application have some login component. React application is having a login component. It is having a register component. It is having a home component like this. These are the components the React application is having. Now what happens is, what components this application can serve? That means what are the components this application can deliver? So that information is kept in a table called route table. Every React application will have a route table. In next sessions, you will design it. You will learn about this route table. You will understand that. That means every React application will have a route table. What is present in this route table is, in that route table, it contains information about what is the path. That means what is the path means what? What is the request? What is the request and what is the response? That means it contains information about the request and response. And here, usually, if the request is like slash home, then what is the response? Response is which component to deliver. That means home component to deliver. If the request is like slash login, then which component to deliver? So it should deliver which one? Login component to deliver. That means on which request, which component to be delivered, which component to be sent as a response, that information is kept in which one? Route table. You request something which is not in that table, then immediately it will respond with a message not found, 404. For example, see, this is Amazon. Suppose I am using Amazon. In Amazon, do you know I want some watches related information? Do you know I don't need to use a search bar? I can just directly go into the address bar. In the address bar, I can make a request watches directly. I can directly make a request like watches. Now, what you are trying to do, is this application capable of handling a request from the address bar like this? Is every application is capable of doing this? And is it capable of fetching the watches information and showing you watches information? So not every application can do that, but some application can do that. But you see now when I hit enter, it will directly get me watches information. I don't need to use a search bar because I know that this is a React tab, and I know that in this React tab, they have a route for watches. That means I know that technically I know that it is a React tab and it have a route for watches. So I can request. I know this, right? And suppose I am requesting here for mobiles, then it will get me the mobiles related information. And I am searching here for televisions, and there is no route for televisions. They don't have. That means they cannot keep route for everyone. They can keep route for very frequent, because having lot of routes for every reason is a difficult thing. Then when you request something and it is not available in their route, then it will deliver you a message not found. You are looking for something, sorry, it is not found. Why it is not showing this for watches? Why it is not showing this for mobiles? Why it is only for televisions? Because they may not have a response. That means what does it means? Amazon is not having televisions information. It is having, but they don't have a route for direct request. You need to access through other. That means now what are the routes it can serve? That list will be present in a table called what? Route table. When you make a request, the request will be handled by whom? The request will be handled by handler. What this handler will do is, the handler is going to make use of a special engine, and we call this engine as routing engine. This handler is going to make use of a routing engine. It makes use of a routing engine. This routing engine will get the request from the client, and it will verify whether the requested route is available or not. If the requested route is available, then it will send the request to the application. Then what application will do? application will load that component into that memory. That means you requested some login, then it will go to the login request. That means from here you are requesting what? So local host. So local host, you have 3000, you have login like this. Am I right? Your request will be like this. When you make a request like this, then what will happen? Request will come to the pool. It will verify whether the app is available or not. If app is available, then it will give that to the routing engine. Routing engine will go and verify in the route table whether that request is there or not. If it is there, then it will respond with that request. That means it will load that component, and whatever the response comes from the component, it will get the response. It will send the response to routing engine. Routing engine will send to handler, and the handler is going to send it back as a response to whom? It is going to send back as a response to the client. This is high level. At high level, internally some more are there. That means inside application, how it will load login. That means inside that application, how it is going to load the login, how it works, how the login works. That at second level, we need to understand. At first level, client makes a request, comes to web server. In web server, request is managed by handler. Handler will make use of a routing engine. This routing engine will verify whether the requested path is available or not. If it is available, then it will load that and it will send as a response. If not available, this routing engine is going to respond with what? 404. It is going to respond with 200. What is 200? 200 means okay. That means the requested is available. 404 means not found. Like that, it will respond with the status codes. So this is the process at high level. So this is level 1. I will give you this diagram in the class. I will upload. But you need to now know the second level. Second level means here how it loads. And third level, after loading this login, inside login, how it loads. That is the third level. That means how application loads login and how login loads its content, how it loads its events, its state, everything. That means then you will understand the component cycle. Component cycle is here, right? But at higher level, above component cycle, application cycle. Above application cycle, complete structural flow of React application. This is what we need to understand. That we'll see in tomorrow's session. What are the life cycle phases and how these work? That means the architecture. This you should be very perfect remembering these points for cracking interviews at experience level. These are very important questions they ask. You should know about them, right? Tomorrow we'll continue with this. Okay, right.